What's happening, everybody? It's your man Dame DNYDC. It's just two mics up. Business Corner, brand new Friday. Starting off the new year, with our second or, I want to say our second guest, but a very important guest, really, because this gentleman has really graced the stage in so many ways. And he's doing some unique things in many ways. And today I'm giving you some wordplay, and you're going to find out what I'm talking about. But as I continue to bring our guest today to the other mic, I want to give a real brief background. Today's guest is a former TEDx presenter, and that's huge, for those who really understand what TEDx is all about and the delivery of stories and meaning, in so many categories, in so many different ways. He's also, a podcast host, which it's always thrilling to have a podcaster, on the show with me. But he's also the founder of Unique Ways. So without going any further, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce Thomas K Girard to the other mic. Thomas, how you doing today, my friend?
Really good.
Good. So how are things going with you in the great up north? How's the weather and how's things going, up in Canada?
Yeah, so I'm recording here in Vancouver, Canada. It's getting a little bit chilly, but it hasn't snowed yet this season. Yeah, it's quite a moderate temperature.
All right. Well, before we get into, digging in more about your work, I have to start, most shows like, who is Thomas K Girard, the person?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to kind of approach that. And so these days I kind of talk about my academic journey, and I talk about this leg of my academic journey, which started in maybe 2019 when I was ready to do my master's studies. And I was accepted to Royal College of Art in London, but decided to stay in Canada instead and do a master's here locally because they had a partnership with Wolfson College, which is one of the University of Oxford's schools. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to do that here from Canada, of course, because of the pandemic and other reasons, and then also be looped into Oxford.
Man, that's awesome, man. So academia is really your sweet spot, if you will, your strength, if you will, right? Now, has that always been the case for you, coming up as a young man, growing up in Canada, or have you always been into reading and really diving into, specific areas most of your life?
Yeah, so I'm trained as a designer. I did my education in my teens and early 20s in communication design here in Vancouver at a really great design school here. And when you're doing education and during those years, that's who you are, right? So in many ways, I was a designer, but then I was also tied to the academy, and I was tied to higher education. So that was a part of who I was as well. And so kind of started out my career as a practicing designer, but then quickly moving into the academy and then teaching pretty quickly higher education, and then kind of always being on that academic journey in some way.
It's interesting, because again, academia and in Canada versus here in the US, what is it like dealing with today's youth, if you will, in academia and in higher education, going, because I know it might be a little bit different, than what it is here in the States. But what is it like, dealing with the youth today and really helping to broaden their minds and their scope, if you will?
Well, it's super interesting, right? And I don't know if this occurred because of the pandemic, but at one point there became this kind of difficulty with traditional education, and people were very much seeking the alternative education routes, and I think they still are today. And I have to kind of have empathy around that. And even though I try to emphasize that it's important to respect the old ways of education that have been around for so long and are still so important, you have to kind of give in a little bit and say, okay, if you want to do things in an alternative way, that's okay too.
And that's very true. I think the pandemic has really, I don't want to say cause, but I mean, it's been a cause and effect, if you will, where, you've had to rethink and reshape maybe traditional ways of education to really meet, I guess, some of the students, because, we were closed in and trapped in and isolated, if you will. So yeah, you've had to kind of change and pivot your way of delivery, which really leads to, my next question, which is really is kind of a combination question. So I'm going to kind of break it down, if I can, in steps. Because being in academia, was that what led for you or allowed you to really get into that TEDx presentation or that TEDx forum? And if so, how did that come about for you? And what was that experience like? And please share part of what you talked about in your presentation.
Sure. I did things a little bit backwards. I went into my master's studies after I had already been teaching for about 4 years locally, and I guess a few years overseas before that. So I really did things backwards. I would have been teaching in Canada for 4 years, and at the tail end of that, that's when I did my TEDx talk here in Vancouver, at a school here in Vancouver. And, and that talk was something that really just was a gut thing. I was talking to the TEDx organizer for the series that I spoke at, and he was like, "What's your idea worth sharing?" And I had no idea what I was going to talk about. I didn't know that you were supposed to come in with an idea to talk to an organizer, and so I just spilled what came out of my head, which was this idea that I had often spent time at airports growing up. I had done a lot of traveling growing up. My dad had lived overseas, and I was also doing my own thing in the States and kind of flying around the States and overseas. And so kind of just unleashed this idea on the organizer that I wanted to talk about spending time in airports. And he laughed and really understood that, because he was a person who did that as well. And so we had a lot of camaraderie from there on.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, and I used to travel quite a bit. I had worked in the trade show industry at one point in my life, so I get it. Spending time at an airport, for some can be really stressful, can be inconvenient, can be a headache. And I like that topic. And was that experience prior to you deciding that, you wanted to start, unique ways? Or was that kind of like hand in hand? Like, how did that whole transition work out?
So that was super interesting, because that would have been in 2019. I was getting ready to do the TED Talk, and that experience is really time consuming. Actually, there's a lot of rehearsals, a lot of practicing. And so, throughout that, let's say, span of a year that I was trying to memorize that talk and internalize that talk and recite that talk, other things were happening in my life, of course. And when you're preparing for a TED Talk and you talk to people about that, they get excited and want to offer you other opportunities. And so one of those opportunities was that I had the opportunity to speak here in the Microsoft building in Vancouver about a topic of my choosing. And I called the topic Unique Ways of Prototyping. And that became a consistent talk workshop that I started to give after that one-off talk that I gave during the time that I was reciting the TED Talk and rehearsing for TED. So they kind of happened at the same time. And or I should at least say the Unique Ways of Prototyping kickoff occurred at the same time, and the Unique Ways of Prototyping talk workshop evolved into the podcast and evolved into the business. So yeah, it all kind of happened at the same time.
That is pretty freaking awesome, man. Like, just how sometimes timing and things, right, just align perfectly, and I want to ask too, like, was that something, like I said, it wasn't at the forefront, if you will, at the time for you, right? Just kind of was a spur or born type thing that evolved from the TED Talk. And unique ways, I want you to talk about that, because you do some really unique things, with Unique Ways. So take a few moments and you really talk to us and let our audience know, what Unique Ways really is all about. The premise, the design, uh, and the type of content and people that you talk to on your platform.
Sure. So Unique Ways now is Unique Ways Consulting. It's a sole proprietorship that's based here in Vancouver, BC. It started as the talk workshop called Unique Ways of Prototyping, which I started in 2019. And, that was pre-pandemic. And I was giving the talk workshop at conferences and universities and meetups. And, that was going really well. In the Microsoft building, we had maybe 100 in-person guests pre-pandemic. But then we evolved into pandemic and I had to transition a little bit. And I still wanted to give the talk like as if I was on a stage, as if I was like actually presenting in person. And so I embraced VR. And I found a VR world where it was actually like a speaking auditorium that I could stand in. Of course, there's my avatar there, but I can stand in, and people would be in the seats in the audience, and I would essentially be giving a real talk, only it was in VR. Wow. And that's early pandemic days. And that worked really well at the beginning. And, kind of a really kind of rich group of audience members that I had never embraced before started to come into the VR world and listen to that talk, which changed its name from Unique Ways of Prototyping to Unique Ways of Making to make it more accessible. And then I had other names for higher education that added complexity to it. So it really started to evolve at that point. And at that point, I think around that point, I had given the talk workshop at Sauder School of Business here in Vancouver at University of British Columbia. And during that time, I realized that I needed that business piece for it. I needed that business angle. It was resonating with business students. They were starting to see how it made sense in their world. And so I decided to register it at that point. And the registering it would have been about 2021, so right in the middle of pandemic. And, during that time, I was, of course, trying many other things as everybody was doing, kind of spaghetti at the wall, trying to figure out how to embrace pandemic and made it through. And after that, eventually post-pandemic started to come back to in-person and come back to the talk workshop, but still at that time, keeping that new piece that I had of the podcast. Yeah,
that's pretty awesome and unique. And I'm listening in my mind. I'm thinking of the VR world. Would have never thought of that, And I think that's a very unique twist, and that was a great pivot. It sounds like for you now. Do you still at times? Do you go back to that? Do you still use that? Is that still part of the repertoire, or it just really depends on maybe the crowd or the topic or the presentation that you're working on?
I was in VR for New Year's, for 2024
wow.
New Year's.
Okay.
Kind of embarrassing, geeky thing to mention, but it's true. I kind of really started to feel at home in VR after a while, but I did kind of leave it behind when I started to do the audio podcast, and especially when I started to invite people into this space. Right now I'm in Unique Ways. I'm in the podcast recording studio, and I invite people in person now into the space, and that's kind of changed everything as well.
Yeah, I could only imagine. And, I have to ask, because it's really something that I find that, or I believe is specific for, any, new entrepreneur, new business owner, getting started that may be watching this, here on our YouTube channel or listening to this on their favorite streaming platform, that there has to be a mission and vision when you start out. I think that's really important. Now, that it may change over time and as you progress and grow. But I'm curious to know for you, Thomas, what was your initial mission and vision, when you first started Unique Ways?
So as I said before, I have a design background. And inevitably when you start a podcast, you invite your friends on, right? So I'm inviting my friends, and they're all designers or design researchers, and people think that I'm doing this design podcast. Basically, it wasn't supposed to be about that, or it wasn't going to be about that. It was more about the lives of people But because it was designers, it was about the lives of designers, which ended up being
Right.
a nice piece. And that evolved into, well, they say it's for people from all walks of life. I mean, that's
Right.
kind of around the mission and around the purpose. But it's definitely about designers, artists, people in the humanities, people in higher education, and some curveballs, some people who just they walk off the street and come on the show. And they all talk about their lives, and
Right.
it's really great. It's one thing to hear a designer talk about their craft and how they create things and who they create them for, what their audience is like. But it's another thing to hear about their day-to-day, what it's like to walk from home to the office in the morning,
Right.
what they have for dinner, do they sit down with their families? These kinds of things are really actually different and interesting in the podcast space, I found.
Yeah.
So that's something.
And that's so true. I think that is the important, whatever it is that your mission and vision is, or in your niche, same thing here. I totally get it. And I like to ask that, to a lot of people, because that 2 Mics Up, we've been blessed to grow. And this business corner is really specific to really what you're talking about. Being able to sit down and talk with people from different walks of life in different business areas and different platforms, so that, anyone could be watching this and they may say, what Thomas is doing really resonates with them. And now they have somewhat of a blueprint and someone that now that, what we always want is for them to go out and follow, and find out more about what you're doing on your most organic level. This is an introduction for those, but they can now go and see and follow and reach out, to you in your mission in unique ways to maybe go ahead and create their own path. So I really believe that question is critical, and I hope any business owner, entrepreneur that is in the space like Thomas, make sure you go ahead and follow him and reach out and connect, because Thomas is really doing some great things with his work. And I'm going to take a brief moment to take a pause for the cause. I want to go ahead and thank our advertising partners here at 2 Mics Up, who are really critical to what we're doing here in our Business Corner segment to bring you more content and guests like Thomas K Girard. So don't go away. We'll be right back after this short commercial break. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we fresh out the break. We're sitting here, we chopping it up with Thomas K Girard, Unique Ways. This gentleman, man, he's been a TEDx presenter. He's a podcast host. He's doing great things in the academic world. He's visiting us today, from the great north, our friends up in Canada. And Thomas, I really appreciate everything that you dropped for us, in the first half of the segment. But I have to really dive in, and I want to ask, because I think this is special, because I played on the wordplay unique earlier, and you're doing unique ways. But what makes unique ways unique to the community that you're really trying to serve? Not only in the Great North, but across Canada and North America, and globally. Let's just keep it real.
Yeah, I do want to emphasize again that we've had these designers on the show, but they're talking about their lives. And the great kind of example of that would be one of our most notable guests, John Maeda, who is on the show. And John Maeda is, the VP of AI at Microsoft right now, and he was the president of Rhode Island School of Design. He was a tenor professor at MIT for many years. And it was an absolute pleasure and gift that he came on the show. But of all things that he talked about how when he was growing up, he was a carbs person, and he ate a lot of carbs. And later in life, he realized that you need to eat protein for breakfast. And, that kind of activates your brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that until then. And right after the episode, I went out and bought a lot of things with protein in them and just started eating a lot of hard-boiled eggs. I was eating like 8 hard-boiled eggs every day because it's such a great protein source.
Right.
And, John Maeda, of all people, telling me that I need to eat hard-boiled eggs was kind of the most fascinating thing. So, designers have these insights about life, and who would expect someone of the caliber of John Maeda to bring it up, So that's kind of what the show, that kind of is emblematic of the show, I think.
I love it. Now I'm going to be playing this in the back of my head, and now I'm probably going to find myself doing quirky things to find more protein and less carbs in my life. But that's a great
Almonds.
story.
Almonds are also good.
And and that's great because and it's funny. I eat a lot of almonds, so maybe I'm already on to something, and I just didn't realize it. But that's a great story. And speaking of stories, so you've also been able to present at Sorbonne, I believe, correct?
Yes,
and
that's right. Yeah.
So because again, these are really, very high level, high reaching opportunities that a lot of people don't get. What was that experience like? I mean, that had to be just a whole nother level of whirlwind experience for you. Can you kind of talk about, what was that like for you and what the process was like?
Great. Yeah, sure. We just hit 2024 when we're recording this, right? But
Yep.
the middle of last year, the middle of 2023, I went to Paris to the Sorbonne by invitation to speak there about one of my published essays.
Wow.
During my graduate studies, I was able to publish a lot and put out some books, and I had the opportunity to read from one of them at the Sorbonne. It was very special. It's a very, you go into, first of all, you can't just go into the Sorbonne. You have to have a reason to be there, and there's security outside that don't let you in. But I was allowed to be there, and so I kind of entered the space, and it's almost, there's so much history there and so much richness there that when you enter the space, you actually feel different. It's a kind of spiritual feeling that it's kind of like being in a church or something like that. It's very, it really kind of hits you. And because I got to spend I was there for a couple of weeks, because I got to spend a lot of time on that campus, it was just magical, and being able to speak in that way and reach people in that space, but also abroad. It was recorded, and you can watch it on my YouTube channel. But you definitely get the feeling that that's a significant environment. I would say that's the biggest thing. People throw around names like Sorbonne and Paris and Oxford, but really, it really hits home when you're in those environments and you're exposed to that kind of magic.
Right.
It's truly something miraculous. There really is something special about it.
I could only imagine, man. And I really thank you for sharing that, because it is magical. It is special. And I wanted to make sure I asked you that and had you share that, because this is not an everyday occurrence. This is very special. And, kudos to you, for being able to have the opportunity and to make it happen. That's very special. That's one of those lifelong memories. That's something that never, I'm sure, like you said, the magic will never disappear.
Mm-hmm. I definitely feel that way. It was, and of all the things that I could mention about it, that's the thing I mentioned, right? So just take note of that.
Mm-hmm. Noted. Very well. Clearly noted. We've been having such a great conversation, and we're coming towards the back end. I do want to ask, with so many of the great things that you've been able to accomplish and achieve, and the things that you're still, really just getting started and probably is still on your bucket list, in the near future, what do you see, or what is next that you can share that's next for you, Thomas?
Today, I just dropped a book. I dropped my 10th self-published book. Wow. It's called Emerging Scholar in Paris, and it talks a little bit about the Sorbonne journey and a little bit about the people who were impacting me during that time. Wow. It also has some repeat content. It has the essay that I read from at the Sorbonne in it. and is in a way a very special piece for me personally, because it's a memory of that time, and it's a kind of physical manifestation of that time. It's something I can hold and say, oh yes, that time is frozen now, and it's a physical thing. That's one major thing. But upcoming this year, I'll be presenting virtually for a conference in Seoul, Korea, and receiving another award, an academic award through that. So that should be in the middle of the year. And then, invitation to Rome to present unique ways of prototyping as well. So yeah, a lot of things.
Man, that's awesome, man. Look, continued success for you and everything that you do moving forward. But Thomas, I would be remiss, before we go, to allow you to go ahead and take a moment to go ahead and please share, your social media, with our audience. I want to make sure, look, ladies and gentlemen, go out and follow, find, read, buy his books, everything that Thomas has got going on. But I want to allow you to go ahead and please share your social media with us before we close out. We'll make sure we put all of that in the show notes.
Sure, yeah. I mean, for websites, because we're talking about unique ways today, check out uniqueways.ca. You can see the featured episodes for the podcast there, and you can see what I do with Unique Ways of Prototyping, the Talk Workshop. If you're looking for my books or me personally and my academic angle, check out thomaskgirard.com. And then for socials, check out onthomas_tweet on X or Twitter. And I'm also on LinkedIn. Check me out there. And yeah, all over social media. And check out my YouTube channel, because you can check out the Sorbonne Talk there.
Man, Thomas, you are an amazing gentleman. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to sit here with us today. I want to say continued success to you and all that you're doing. You're part of the family now. You ever want to come back and you want to talk some more, I know you have some other areas of expertise that you're working on. We'd be happy to go ahead and talk with you about that. But thank you again for being here this evening.
Thanks.
No problem at all. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another Two Mics Up Business Corner with, the great Thomas K Girard. Definitely please go out and check him out, support him in his works. You can catch Two Mics Up Business Corner each and every Friday, 1 p.m. We're going to be releasing these episodes on YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Next week's guest, will be Anthony Bryant. He is the founder and CEO of Sovereign Payments. Check him, come in and check us out, because we're bringing you new content from all industries, all areas, all walks of life. And there's always something here in the Business Corner for someone, who wants to learn, who wants to listen, who just wants to get full of knowledge. Come check out Anthony next week. You know me, I'm your man, Dame DNYDC. You can follow me across social media, IG, Facebook, Twitter, at Dame DNYDC. Don't forget to follow Two Mics Up. Make sure you subscribe across all social media, IG, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Two Mics Up. And don't forget, season 6, Two Mics Up, the actual show. It's on Mogul Global TV Network, the #1 network for positive programming. We're in 1 million homes, y'all. Make sure you check us out Monday nights, 8 p.m. Not only 1 million homes, 32 countries. We just added a new country as of this last meeting. So we are expanding and growing. And like we always do at the end of each and every segment of Two Mics Up, I'm going to leave you with a few things. May you all stay safe, stay blessed. Mics out.